The concept of self-domestication in animals, particularly dogs, is quite intriguing. One prominent theory suggests that dogs began their domestication journey by scavenging around human settlements, especially garbage dumps. This theory posits that less aggressive wolves were more successful at scavenging near humans, leading to a natural selection process favoring those with friendlier and more cooperative traits. However, some researchers argue against this dump theory. They suggest that the domestication of dogs was more complex and involved active cooperation and emotional bonds between humans and wolves long before the existence of human waste dumps. This perspective highlights the psychological and neurobiological similarities between humans and dogs that facilitated their close relationship. Overall, the self-domestication hypothesis emphasizes that the evolution of dogs from wolves was likely driven by a combination of factors, including reduced aggression and increased sociability. In our fast paced, ever changing world, resilience has become more crucial than ever. Resilience is not about avoiding difficulties, but about navigating through them. It's the skill to bounce back from adversity, a trait that can be developed and strengthened over time. For example, someone who overcomes a personal loss and finds a way to grow from the experience demonstrates high resilience. But how do we cultivate this resilience? It begins with fostering a positive mindset, practicing self-care, and building strong social connections. Mindfulness and cognitive behavioral techniques can also be instrumental in developing coping strategies. Furthermore, resilience isn't just an individual journey. Supportive environments, whether in families, workplaces, or communities, play a vital role in nurturing resilience. Recognizing and managing stress, providing emotional support, and encouraging open communication are key factors. Understanding and developing psychological resilience can profoundly impact our well-being. It equips us to handle life's challenges more effectively, leading to improved mental health and overall life satisfaction. There are at least 5 hotspots of floating plastic in the global ocean. These are gyres, where circulating currents trap debris. This one, the so-called Great Pacific Garbage Patch, is the largest, with almost 80,000 tons distributed over 600,000 square miles. The scientists teamed up with a charity that collects old fishing gear and other litter from the ocean, and gathered hundreds of plastic items to study in the lab. They found plants and animals, including anemones, tiny marine bugs, mollusks, and crabs on 90% of the debris they examined. As well as creating a semi-permanent floating habitat for coastal species in the open ocean, the researchers say all this plastic could be providing invasive species with rafts that allow them to cross the Pacific. This, they say, is yet another unintended consequence of plastic pollution for the ocean. Giant exoplanets, like the so-called hot Jupiters that are similar in biggest characteristics to the Solar System's planet and orbit very close to their host stars, are excellent targets for astronomers in their search for their extrasolar worlds. The size and proximity of these planets is easy to detect, as they create a large decrease in brightness when passing in front of their parent stars. Two decades ago, Kashmiri houseboat owners rubbed their hands every spring at the prospect of the annual influx of tourists. From May to October, the hyacinth-choked waters of Dal Lake saw flotillas of vividly painted shikaras carrying Indian families, boho Westerners, young travelers, and wide-eyed Japanese. Carpet sellers honed their skills, as did purveyors of anything remotely embroidered, while the houseboats initiated by the British Raj provided unusual accommodation. Any foreigners venturing there risked their lives, proved in 1995 when 5 young Europeans were kidnapped and murdered. In America, there is certainly the potential for ethnic conflict. Categorically, our colossal metroplexes will not be sustainable in a post-oil future, and despite the wishes and yearnings of many people, the truth is that no combination of alternative fuels will permit us to continue living at this scale. Some of our cities will not make it. Phoenix away. In Las Vegas, the excitement will be over. Tucson and other Sunbelt cities will dry up, and blow will not be a viable building type in our other megacities will have to downscale or face extreme dysfunction. One thing that almost nobody is paying attention to: the skyscraper energy scarce future. 6 or 7 stories must be the practical supply, is not necessarily as reliable as it has been in our time. Cities limit in a new age when electric overburdened, with megastructures will have a severe liability. Based on the strength of Earth's gravity and the density and strength of rock, in principle you could make a single conical mountain that stretched between New York and Chicago and soared over 45 kilometers. That's twice the size of Olympus Mons and definitely dwarfs Everest. However, there are a couple of reasons why we can't actually have that humongous of a mountain on Earth. For one, Earth's crust is made of continental plates that essentially float in the semi-solid rock of the mantle below. If you add more weight above the surface, they sink lower into the Earth's hot interior, and when they sink far enough, they soften and basically melt. For our conical mountain, that gives a new height limit of just 15 kilometers. As well, the powerful collision of two tectonic plates, which creates mountains in the first place, also fractures and cracks the rock, weakening its structure and exposing it to erosion. Over millions of years, freeze-thaw cycles pry at these cracks, while winds claw at the slopes and streams and glaciers carve deep valleys into the mountainside, all weakening the mountain's support. This can end badly. For example, 764m tall Aoraki Mount Cook in New Zealand had its top fall off one night in 1991, trimming it down to a 754m mountain. Given all the factors that conspire to limit the height of mountains, for example sinking into the Earth's mantle, fractures, and erosion, I wouldn't bet on our tallest mountains getting too much taller than they already are. The first 2 years of a baby's life are critical for brain development. In this study, parents were given video-based tips on how best to interact with their babies according to their particular needs. By the age of 3, the baby still had some developmental difficulties, but their social skills had improved, and 2/3 fewer met the criteria for a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, compared to babies who received standard care. The research charity Autistica said the study was promising and people should not have to wait for a diagnosis for support to be provided. But the National Autistic Society said autism was not a disease that should be cured or lessened. The research team says longer-term studies on more babies using the technique are now needed. Listening to the soft rustle of the leaves, it's a sound that you simply cannot hear without silence. What you can sense in the noisy environment becomes suddenly vivid in the quiet. How clear and pure the sound is. It's fascinating, but it's also soothing. Suddenly, it's as if another realm has touched your auditory sense and you think, hey, I hadn't realized that something so faint, so subtle could be so.
Margaret Brown was a social and political activist in the formative years of the modern American West. Her biggest claim to fame was surviving the Titanic. This week on our program, we tell the story of the woman remembered as the unsinkable Molly Brown. Margaret Brown lived an interesting life, but not all the stories about her are true. For example, a Denver newspaper reporter named Jean Fowler wrote that she survived a tornado as a baby, refused to attend school, and chewed tobacco. Fowler wrote about Brown and others in his book Timberline, published after her death in 1932. Monkeys are very similar to us in many ways. Most have 10 fingers and 10 toes, and brains much like ours. We enjoy watching them because they often act like us. In fact, Charles Darwin's theory of evolution says that monkeys and humans share a common ancestor. Songwriter William Gilbert, in the musical Princess Ida, wrote, "Darwinian man, though well-behaved, at best is only a monkey shaved." His words, sung to Sir Arthur Sullivan's music, make listeners smile. Well, monkeys make us smile, too, because they are creatures full of playful tricks. This is why many monkey expressions are about tricky people or playful acts. One of these expressions is monkey shines, meaning tricks or foolish acts. Today we explain some expressions about birds. For example, if something is for the birds, it is worthless or not very interesting. Someone who eats like a bird eats very little. And a bird's eye view is a general look at an area from above. Did you know that if you tell a young person about the birds and the bees, you are explaining about sex and birth? Have you ever observed that birds of a feather flock together? In other words, people who are similar become friends or do things together. Here is some good advice: a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. This means you should not risk losing something you have by trying to get more of something you do not have.
We will hold a celebration for the graduate students. Criminal charges will be brought against all of the men. We will hold a celebration for the graduate students.